The first thing you hear is breathing. Fast, shallow, ragged. The kind of breathing from someone who has been running for too long, whose body wants to stop, but whose mind refuses to let it. Then come the headlights. A pair of beams tear through the thick curtain of rain, flickering like static on an old television. A mud-caked Chevy Tahoe skids sideways onto a two-lane road in the rural stretches of Washburn County, Wisconsin. October. The cold here does not kill you right away, but it always reminds you that it absolutely could. Behind the wheel, Shelley Webber grips the steering wheel with both hands, her knuckles white. She is 34, thin in the way of women who always place meals behind everything else. Her dark blonde hair has been hastily tied back, but that knot came loose hours ago. Beneath her left eye is a bruise, not fresh, about 4 days old, the edges already beginning to yellow. This morning she covered it with concealer, but the rain had washed it all away 3 counties ago. In the rearview mirror are 3 faces. Oliver, 12, sits behind the passenger seat, his arms folded tightly across his chest. He has not said a single word since they left Eau Claire. His jaw works in silent tension, as if chewing the air to pieces, a habit he learned from watching a man he is now trying with all his might not to become. He is tall for his age, and he hates that. Margot, 9, sits in the middle, a spiral notebook open on her lap. She is writing something. She is always writing. When her parents fought, she wrote. When the family moved the first time, she wrote. She is like the family's recording secretary for every disaster, and she has not looked up once. Teddy, 5, is asleep in his safety seat. His head lolls to one side, his mouth slightly open, one foot already missing its shoe. In his arms he is clutching a stuffed rabbit with one torn ear. He named the rabbit Patch-Up, because someone once told him that broken things could still be fixed. He believes that. Shelley's phone vibrates on the passenger seat. She glances over. On the screen it reads, Lawson. 14 missed calls. She flips the phone face down. The GPS had died 20 minutes ago. Out here, cell service was something you hoped for, not something you could count on. Shelley squinted through the rain-blurred windshield, trying to find the turn her cousin had mentioned in an email 8 months earlier. An email she had memorized almost word for word, but had never replied to. If you need a place to stay, there's a piece of land just outside Ridgewater. An old apple orchard. The owner lives alone, name's Sawyer. He rents out the guest house. Just say Patty sent you. He's not friendly, but he's fair. Now Patty was dead. Ovarian cancer. Fast and merciless. Shelley found out on Facebook, when the funeral had already been over for 2 months. She did not go to pay her respects. Lawson would not let her go. Lawson would not let her do a great many things, though he never called what he did by its proper name. He would only say, I just thought it would be better this way. And then the 4 walls around her would seem to close in a little more. The Tahoe's engine gave a rough cough, like someone having an asthma attack. Shelley glanced down at the fuel gauge. The needle hovered just above empty, trembling as if it too was afraid to admit what was painfully obvious. Mom, Oliver's voice came from the back seat. Flat, not a question. I know, Shelley said. Do you really? She did not answer. The turnoff appeared like a rumor, a gravel road branching away from the county road, half hidden behind overgrown sumac, and a crooked mailbox with no name on it. Shelley turned the wheel and took it. The Tahoe lurched over potholes and standing water. Branches scraped along both sides of the vehicle, sounding like fingers trying to hold them back. Then, through the rain, a porch light appeared. It was not exactly warm. It looked more like a stubborn eye, refusing to close against the dark. The light spilled from a farmhouse at the end of the drive, its white painted boards weathered to gray, a wraparound porch sagging at one corner, a detached garage with its door hanging partly open. Beyond that, rows of old, gnarled apple trees stretched into the night, their bare branches dripping rain steadily onto the ground. Shelley brought the car to a stop in front of the house and turned off the engine. For a moment, she just sat there, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. "Where are we?" Margot asked, her eyes never leaving her notebook. "Somewhere safe," Shelley said. Oliver gave the faintest snort. He had heard that one before. Shelley stepped out of the car. The rain lashed against her like punishment. She climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door. 3 short, firm knocks, followed by silence. She stood waiting. Then she knocked again. The door opened about 6 inches. A man stood, filling the gap. Sawyer Hollis was 41, with the look of someone who worked with his hands and had never talked much about it. His hair was dark, cut short, already graying at the temples. His face might once have been handsome, before something in life wore away whatever softness had been left in it. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, faded jeans stained at the knees, and no shoes. From behind him, the house carried the faint smell of coffee and sawdust. He looked at Shelley, then past her, toward the Tahoe, where 3 small shapes sat dimly visible behind the rain-blurred glass. "No vacancy," he said. "Patty Engstrom sent me here." Shelley's voice caught when she said the name. "She said you rented out the guest house." Sawyer's face changed when he heard Patty's name. It did not exactly soften. It was more like a lock being opened, though the door had not yet truly swung free. "Patty's dead," he said. "I know. She was my cousin." Sawyer looked at her for a long moment, exactly 3 seconds, though it felt longer. His gaze stopped at the bruise beneath her eye. Shelley could tell that he saw it. And she could also tell that he decided not to ask. "The guest house doesn't have heat," he said. "The furnace broke in August, still hasn't been fixed. We have blankets. The roof leaks, right over the bathroom. We'll put a bucket under it. $400 a month. First and last month up front." Shelley slipped a hand into her coat pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. She counted out $800, her hand trembling from the cold or the adrenaline, or both. She held the money out. Sawyer looked at the cash, looked at her, then looked back toward the Tahoe. "There's a portable heater in the garage," he said, taking the money. "I'll bring it over later." Then he closed the door. The guest house sat about 100 meters from the main house, tucked behind a windbreak of white pines. It was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchenette with a porcelain sink, a bathroom tiled in hexagons, and a clawfoot tub. Everything inside was about 20 years old, clean in the way of a place that had not been lived in for a very long time. Shelley carried Teddy in first. The boy was still asleep, limp with exhaustion, and she laid him down on the large bed. Margot came in behind them, her eyes sweeping across every room as if she were documenting a crime scene. Oliver, meanwhile, brought in the belongings: 2 canvas bags, a trash bag stuffed with clothes, a box of cereal, and a jug of milk that had gone warm hours ago. That was all. Everything Shelley Webber had taken with her when she left. She stood in the kitchen, both hands braced against the counter, trying to steady her breathing. Outside the window, rain still poured down through the dark. Through the trees, she could see the faint light spilling from Sawyer's house. Oliver appeared in the doorway. "How long?" he asked. Shelley turned around. "What? How long are we going to stay here?" "I don't know yet. You said the exact same thing at that motel in La Crosse, and at the Airbnb before that. Oliver, and Aunt Jenny's couch, and—" I said, "I don't know." Her voice came out sharper than she meant it to. She saw Oliver flinch, just slightly, but the guilt still hit her like a punch. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm doing the best I can." Oliver looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned away and went into the bedroom he was sharing with Teddy. He did not slam the door. That was almost worse. There was a knock at the door. Shelley opened it and found Sawyer standing on the steps, holding a portable heater, a bag of ground coffee, and a flashlight. "The power out here flickers whenever there's a storm," he said, handing her the flashlight. "The breaker box is in the cabinet next to the bathroom." "Thank you." He set the heater down just inside the door, then straightened up. He had already turned to leave, but then stopped. "The boy," he said. "The older one." Shelley tensed at once. "What about him?" "He carried all the things in himself. Didn't ask for help once." Sawyer's voice remained flat, as though he were simply stating an ordinary observation. A 12-year-old shouldn't be so used to moving house. He left before Shelley could answer. She closed the door and stood there, holding the bag of coffee and the flashlight in her arms. And for the first time since leaving Eau Claire, she broke down and cried. Silently, one hand clamped tightly over her mouth, because Shelley Webber had learned how to cry without making a single sound. Morning. The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked as though it had not decided what it wanted to become next. It hung low and gray over the orchard, pressing down on everything like a hand against a bruise. Shelley woke on the sofa, still wearing the clothes from the night before. She had only managed about 2 hours of sleep. The space heater crackled in the corner. She went to check on the children. Teddy was lying sideways across the bed, patch-up tucked beneath his chin. Margot had already been awake for some time, sitting cross-legged on the floor and writing. "What are you writing?" Shelley asked softly. "A list," Margot replied, her eyes never leaving the page. "A list of what?" "All the places we've stayed since June." The girl held up the notebook. There were 9 entries in it. Shelley swallowed. "That's a lot." "I know," Margot said. "I'm counting, so at least one person is." The words lodged in Shelley's chest like a splinter. Shelley found Sawyer out in the orchard. He was standing on a ladder propped against the trunk of a honeycrisp tree, using a handsaw to prune away the dead branches. Every movement he made was precise, almost surgical. He cut close to the branch collar, angling the saw blade to avoid scarring the bark. He did it as though performing a ritual. "Good morning," Shelley said. Sawyer glanced down. "There's coffee in the kitchen if you want some, in the main house. The door's unlocked." "I brought my own." "The bag you gave me last night." "Right." Then he turned back to sawing. Shelley stood watching him for a moment. "Do you do all of this by yourself?" "Yeah." "The whole orchard?" "What's left of it? I lost half the Cortland block to fire blight 2 years ago. The Macintosh section hasn't produced decent fruit since the drought." He spoke with the tone of a doctor describing a patient's condition, cold, concise, precise, yet carrying underneath it the weight of someone who cared more than he wanted to admit. "Is there anything I can help with?" Shelley asked. Sawyer paused and looked down at her. "What do you know about apple trees?" "Nothing, but I know how to work." He thought for a moment. "The fallen limbs in the east rows need clearing. Stack them by the burn pit. Don't pile them too high. Spread them out flat, or they'll never dry." "Spread them out flat." "Got it." Shelley started to walk away. Behind her, Sawyer's sawing resumed in its steady rhythm. He did not say thank you, and she did not wait for it. By noon, Shelley had cleared 2 rows of trees. Her back ached as though it might tear apart. Blisters had risen on her palms where the bark had scraped through her skin. It had been years since she had done this kind of physical labor. Lawson had always believed that work like this was beneath her. Lawson believed a great many things were beneath her, which was really just another way of keeping the ceiling low. When she returned to the guest house, she found trouble. Teddy was sitting on the porch of the main house, chattering away to Sawyer. who was sanding a window frame and had quite clearly not invited the boy to come any closer. And Patch-Up used to have 2 ears, but one fell off in the car, and then Mom said she would sew it back on, but she hasn't yet because we don't have a needle. A sewing needle, Sawyer said. Yes, that. A sewing needle. Do you have one? Probably somewhere. Can you fix him? I fix houses, not rabbits. But it's easy. You just have to put the ear back on and then make the string go through. Sawyer set the sandpaper down. He looked at the 5-year-old boy missing one shoe, clutching a ragged stuffed rabbit, wearing the absolute certainty that a complete stranger could fix it. Sawyer's face tightened slightly. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Go get it," he said. Teddy beamed, then took off running inside. Shelley stood out by the path, watching, without going any closer. She saw Sawyer open the drawer beneath the porch bench, take out a leather case, then pull from it a needle and a thick spool of thread. When Teddy came running back with Patch-Up in his arms, Sawyer took the rabbit, held it up at eye level, examined it as though assessing the damage to some kind of structure, and then began sewing the torn ear back on. His hands were very careful, much more careful than those of a man who insisted he only fixed houses. Shelley went back to the guest house before he could see her standing there. The days kept passing. Little by little, the family settled into a rhythm that was not quite a habit yet, but perhaps would become one. Each morning, Shelley went out to work in the orchard. Not because Sawyer was generous. He deducted the labor from the rent, dollar for dollar, and recorded everything in a ledger in handwriting so neat and orderly it looked like a technical drawing. Gradually, she learned how to tell water sprouts from fruiting branches. She also learned that Sawyer had not sold apples for 3 seasons, ever since the roadside stand closed, and that this orchard was dying slowly, in the way all things die when only one person is left trying to tend them. She also began to notice the things Sawyer never said aloud. The second bedroom in his house was always kept closed. The picture frames on the bookshelf were turned face down. A pair of child-sized rain boots stood by the back door, too small to belong to any adult, coated in dust and untouched. Oliver was still as prickly as ever. Not toward Shelley, but toward this whole situation. He refused to go explore the orchard, refused to speak to Sawyer, and refused even the idea of school whenever Shelley brought it up. "We're not going to be here long," he said for the 4th time, sitting at the kitchen table in the guest house with his arms folded tightly across his chest. "We never stay anywhere long. This time might be different." "You always say that." "Because I always honestly mean it." "Then why does Dad keep calling?" Shelley's phone was lying face down on the table. It began to vibrate, as if someone had just summoned it. Both of them looked at it. "Eat your breakfast," Shelley said. Oliver pushed his plate away and got up to leave. Margot became the bridge. She was the first to start talking to Sawyer, not with Teddy's boldness, but with a kind of quiet, careful curiosity. One afternoon, she found him in the wood shop, a space behind the garage that had been converted. Inside were a workbench, a lathe, hand tools hanging on a pegboard, each one outlined as if to mark its place. On the shelf running along the wall were unfinished pieces: a child's chair, a toy chest with dovetail joints so tight the seams were almost invisible, and a rocking horse that had been sanded smooth but never painted. Margot stood looking at them. "Who did you make these for?" she asked. Sawyer did not answer right away. He was planing a board, long curls of wood shavings falling to the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "There isn't anyone left to make them for." Margot nodded. She did not ask anything else. Instead, she sat down on an overturned bucket and opened her notebook. "Can I sit here and write? It's quieter here than in the guest house." "Suit yourself," she wrote. He worked. Neither of them said anything. The silence between them did not feel hostile. It was the kind of silence shared by two people who both understood that some rooms are made to create something, not to be filled with noise. Then it became a habit. Every afternoon, Margot sat in the wood shop to write, and Sawyer kept building things that would never be delivered to anyone again. Sawyer gradually learned things about Margot without ever trying to. She had a habit of biting the end of her eraser whenever she got stuck on a word. She was willing to cross out an entire page, but never tear it out. Because even the bad parts still happened, she had once told him. She counted everything: how many windows the guest house had, 7, how many steps it was from the guest house to the main house, 214, and how many days it had been since her family arrived there. That number she updated every morning on the inside cover of her notebook, in red ink. One Thursday, Margot brought Sawyer a sandwich: turkey, white bread, crusts cut off. She set it down on the workbench without saying anything. "I didn't ask for that," Sawyer said. "My mom says you forget to eat. Your mother talks too much. My mom says the same thing about you, just in the opposite direction." Sawyer picked up the sandwich. Then he ate it. It was the first meal anyone had made for him in 4 years. One day, without looking up from the page, Margot said, "My dad used to break things when he got mad. He would throw a plate or kick a chair. Then afterward he'd apologize and buy a new one. Like buying a new plate made breaking the old one acceptable." Sawyer's hand went still. "I don't mean that made it okay," Margot added. "I mean, Dad thought it did." "No," Sawyer said softly. "It didn't." He went back to planing the wood. Margot went back to writing, but something in the room had shifted. The kind of shift a foundation makes when it starts to slip, invisible, but enough for a person to feel it in every wall. The call came on a Tuesday. Shelley was standing in the storage shed, sorting bruised apples, the kind too damaged to sell but still good enough for cider if they ever got the press fixed, when her phone rang. It was not Lawson, an unfamiliar number. She answered. "Shelley, this is David Kenner." The man's voice on the other end was warm, courteous, steeped in professionalism. "I'm calling on Lawson's behalf. He has retained me as his attorney." Shelley's stomach dropped. "He wants to discuss a solution with you. For the good of the children. There's nothing to discuss." "Shelley, I understand emotions are running very high right now, but Lawson is the children's father. He has rights, legal rights, and frankly, the fact that you disappeared and took the children across state lines, that is going to raise quite a few questions." "He hit me, David." A silence followed. Deliberate. Calculated. Lawson has expressed deep remorse for what he describes as an isolated incident that occurred during a period of extreme stress. He has enrolled in anger management. He is seeing a therapist. He is changing, Shelley. The language was perfect, precise, carefully measured. It sounded like healing, like growth. Like the kind of language a judge would be willing to hear. For now, he wants to begin with shared custody. Just weekends. Very reasonable. And he is willing to be flexible. Flexible, Shelley repeated. He loves the children. Shelley closed her eyes. She knew how this game worked. She had seen it before. The machinery of polite men, the thing that could turn pain into legal paperwork. Lawson would not shout. Lawson would not make threats. Lawson would show up in a neatly pressed shirt, with a letter from his therapist and his lawyer smiling beside him, and the whole system would look at him and see a father trying to do the right thing. That system would not see the mornings when Shelley could not leave the bedroom because the door had been blocked by the dresser he dragged in the night before. For your safety. It would not see the way he checked her phone, then apologized in a voice so gentle that she ended up feeling guilty for getting angry. It would not see Oliver's face on the night Lawson grabbed Shelley's arm right there at the dinner table, while everyone kept eating as if nothing had happened, because they had all learned that pretending was safer than reacting. "Do not contact me again," Shelley said, and hung up. Her hand was shaking. An apple slipped from her grasp and hit the floor of the shed. It bruised a little more when it landed. That evening, Shelley told Sawyer, not everything. She still was not ready to tell it all, but enough. They sat out on the porch of the main house. The children were in the guest house. October had turned properly cold now, and each of their breaths drifted into the air in thin clouds. "His lawyer called," she said, "about custody." Sawyer simply listened. "He's doing everything the right way, on paper. Therapy, anger management, the whole polished performance." She wrapped her arms tightly around herself. "And I have nothing, no lawyer, no proof. I didn't take pictures. I didn't file a report. I just left." Sawyer was quiet for a while. He held a mug of coffee gone cold in his hands. "My wife died 4 years ago," he said. Shelley turned to look at him. "Car accident." Black ice on Highway 63, on the bridge over the Namecagon. She was driving back from Hayward. My son was in the back seat. His voice remained flat, but the way he held the mug, with both hands, gripping it too tightly, made it seem as if that ceramic cup was the only thing in the world still solid enough to hold on to. "Ethan, he was 3. Shelley said nothing. She did not offer condolences. She understood that some things do not need an answer. Afterward, Sawyer continued, everyone said exactly what they were supposed to say. People brought food for a month. The pastor came by. The county sent a grief counselor, and I sat in this house, in the very room I built for that boy with my own hands, and thought, I made every joint in that crib. I sanded every edge so he wouldn't get a splinter in his hand. And in the end, none of that meant a damn thing." He set the mug down. "For a while, I stopped fixing things. I couldn't see the point anymore. Then eventually I started again, only because I didn't know what else I still knew how to do. But I haven't finished anything since." Shelley looked at him. "The wood shop, those toys." "Yeah. You still make them, but you don't finish them." "Because finishing means the thing is done," he said. "And once it's done, it has to go somewhere. And now, there's nowhere left for it to go." The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. It was the silence of two people standing at the edge of their own wounds, quietly looking across to the other side. "I don't know how to help you with the legal part," Sawyer said at last, "but I know a little about what it's like to have to face something before you're ready." Shelley nodded. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Then she stopped. "There's something else." Sawyer waited. "Oliver, lately he's started sleeping in the closet." "What?" "In the bedroom closet. He takes his pillow and blanket in there. Then he shuts the door. I found him in there this morning." Her voice was careful, almost clinical. The voice she always used whenever she was trying not to fall apart. "He says it's warmer in there, but he did it before, too. Back in Minneapolis, when things were at their worst." Sawyer went completely still. "He locks himself into a small space, because small spaces are more predictable," Shelley said. "In a closet, nothing can surprise him. He can hear everything, and nothing can come up behind him. He's 12. He's 12, but he's been living like he was 40 since he was 9. Sawyer looked down at his mug. "When Ethan was just learning to walk, every time he fell, he'd look up at me first. Not Rachel, me. Like he was asking, is this the kind of fall I'm allowed to cry over, or the kind I'm supposed to get up from by myself?" He stopped. "I think about that all the time, about what a child learns just by watching. about the things they carry without anyone ever telling them they have to. Shelley nodded. Oliver carries all of it, and he can't put it down, because he sees that I can't either. I taught him that. Not on purpose, but I did. You also taught him how to keep going. Sometimes keeping going is just another name for not daring to face it. Sawyer did not argue. He knew she was right. He also knew she was being too hard on herself, but that was not yet the thing to say. The East Rows look a lot better, he said after a while, his voice gentler now. No one's gotten them that cleared in years. It was not exactly comfort, but it was not entirely not that either. It was simply the thing he could say while still telling the truth, and at that moment, that kind of truth was enough. Everything started to break apart before it had the chance to get better. That part matters. That is what makes it real. Oliver got into a fight at Ridgewater Middle School. He had only been enrolled there for 8 days. A boy named Tyler asked where his father was. Oliver did not answer. Tyler asked again, louder this time, right in the middle of the cafeteria. Oliver punched him square in the mouth. Shelley got the call at 11 o'clock. She drove to the school, sat in the principal's office, and listened as they explained the zero-tolerance policy. "He's been here less than a week," Shelley said. "We understand, Mrs. Webber." Ms. Webber, but we are required to enforce the rules consistently. Oliver was suspended for 3 days. Shelley drove him home in silence. He sat in the passenger seat, his right hand swollen, his eyes fixed on the flat Wisconsin fields sliding past outside the window. The road stretched on endlessly in both directions. On either side were cornfields gone dormant, stalk stubble poking through a thin layer of snow. Above them, a hawk circled slowly and silently. "He asked about Dad," Oliver said suddenly. "I know. What was I supposed to say?" "In some way that didn't involve smashing someone's face in." "Like what?" Oliver turned to look at her. "Dad's great. He just sometimes shoves Mom into walls if dinner's late." Shelley pulled the car over onto the gravel shoulder. She stopped, turned off the engine, then just sat there, both hands on the steering wheel, not looking at her son. "I should have left sooner," she said. "Yeah," Oliver's voice went rough. "You should have." "I know." "Then why didn't you?" Shelley opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wanted to explain. The money, the isolation, the way fear can quietly rearrange everything in your head until you can no longer tell which things are doors and which are walls. But Oliver was 12. He did not need an explanation. He needed the truth. "Because I was afraid," she said, "and because every time I got close to leaving, your father turned into exactly the kind of man I used to hope he could be." "Just long enough?" Oliver looked at her. His eyes were wet, but he did not cry. He only nodded once. "Mr. Sawyer isn't like that," he said quietly. Shelley blinked. "What?" "He doesn't pretend. He's kind of grumpy, but he's the same kind of grumpy every day." Oliver gave the slightest shrug. "At least you always know what you're getting." Despite everything, Shelley almost laughed. The first real fracture between Shelley and Sawyer came on a cold night near the end of October. Teddy came down with a fever. Not dangerously high, but already at 39 degrees Celsius and still climbing. Shelley was running water into the tub in the guest house when she realized the water heater had died. She wrapped Teddy in a blanket and carried him over to the main house. Sawyer opened the door. The moment he saw the boy's flushed face and heard his exhausted whimpering, he understood. "The hot water in the guest house is out," Shelley said. Sawyer stepped aside to let them in. He went to run the bath himself, while Shelley kept holding Teddy in her arms. The boy was shivering, then leaned toward Sawyer, his tiny hand clutching the front of the man's shirt. "I'm cold," Teddy mumbled. I know, buddy, Sawyer said, and the word slipped out before he could stop it. His whole body went rigid. He stepped back. Something slammed shut in his eyes. I'll check the water heater tomorrow, he said, now already standing back in the hallway. Towels are in the cabinet. Then he disappeared. Shelley heard the door to the closed room, Ethan's room, open and then shut. She bathed Teddy alone. The next morning, Sawyer was distant. Not rude, he had never truly been rude, but the temperature between them had changed. He answered only in clipped sentences. He did not look Shelley in the eye. When Teddy ran up to him in the yard, clutching Patch-Up and asking if they could build a fort together, Sawyer only said, "I'm busy," and walked straight into the shed. Shelley watched it happen. She understood. But understanding did not mean it did not hurt. That evening she found him in the woodshop. He was sanding the rocking horse again. The rocking horse he had been sanding for years. "You can't keep doing this forever," Shelley said from the doorway. Sawyer did not look up. Doing what? Opening the door and then slamming it shut again. With the children. With me. No one is making you stand in the doorway. No. But I am standing here. He stopped, set the sandpaper down. The boy grabbed my shirt, Sawyer said, and for about half a second I forgot. His voice caught. I forgot he wasn't. He did not finish the sentence. Shelley stepped into the shop. She did not touch him. She only stood close enough that if he wanted to leave, he would have to look at her. I am not asking you to replace what you lost, she said, and neither are the children. But you cannot call Teddy buddy and then pull away like nothing happened. He will think it was his fault. Children always think everything is their fault. Sawyer's jaw tightened. He looked down at the rocking horse. I know, he said. Then don't let him learn that lesson one more time. It was the hardest thing Shelley had said to anyone in years, harder even than leaving Lawson. Because this time it was no longer about survival. It was about daring to ask for more than just surviving. Sawyer was silent for a long time. The water heater needs a new thermocouple, he said at last. I'll fix it tomorrow. It was not an apology, but it was a door opening again. November brought hard frosts with it. They killed off the last of the wildflowers and laid a thin silver coating over the orchard at every dawn. The trees were bare now, stripped of everything, and there was a severity to the landscape that Shelley found strangely comforting. No more pretending. Everything was simply itself. Things changed very slowly. Sawyer fixed the water heater. Then he fixed the roof of the guest house. Then, one morning, he showed up with a shelf he had built by hand. Your kitchen doesn't have anywhere to put the cereal boxes, and installed it himself without being asked. Oliver, after going back to school following his suspension, began spending time in the shed. Not exactly with Sawyer, but near him. He sat on a bale of hay doing homework while Sawyer worked on machinery. One afternoon, Oliver watched Sawyer struggling to hold a fence post steady while hammering. You need help? Oliver asked. You think you can hold this steady for about 10 minutes? Probably longer than that. Sawyer almost smiled. Almost. Then they started working together. Sawyer did not give long explanations. He showed Oliver how to shift his body weight, how to hammer a nail so it would not bend, how to measure twice before cutting once. Oliver listened with the fierce concentration of a boy who had never had a man teach him anything without conditions attached. One evening, Shelley happened to overhear Oliver talking to Margot in the guest house. He doesn't yell, Oliver said. I know, Margot replied. Even when you dropped that wrench on his foot, he just said, damn, and kept going. That's what normal is, Oliver. Really? The question just hung there, and Shelley had to step away from the hallway, because she knew that if she stood there listening any longer, she would fall apart. Lawson came after them on a Wednesday. Not in person. Worse than that. At 9 in the morning, a woman from Washburn County Social Services knocked on the door of the guest house. She carried a clipboard and wore the smile of someone trained to appear neutral. Her name was Linda Phelps. She explained that a complaint had been filed regarding the living conditions and educational stability of 3 minor children. "Who filed it?" Shelley asked, though she already knew. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that, Ms. Webber. This is procedure." She tilted her head slightly. "May I come in?" Shelley stepped aside to let her in. Linda Phelps made a round of the guest house, taking notes on the portable heater, the bucket under the leak, the shared bedroom. She asked about school enrollment, medical records, income. "I'm working," Shelley said. "At the orchard." "Off the books?" It's part of the rental arrangement. I work in exchange for a reduction in rent." Linda wrote something on the clipboard. "And the property owner, Mr. Hollis. What is his relationship to the children?" "He's the landlord." "Are you and he in a romantic relationship?" "No." Linda nodded, but her pen kept moving across the page. After she left, Shelley sat down on the front steps of the guest house and called the only person she could think of. Helen Baxter, the owner of the grocery store in Ridgewater, who always sold Shelley eggs at half price and always asked after the children. "Helen, I need a lawyer." "Shelley, honey, what happened?" Lawson filed a report with CPS. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Helen said, "That bastard. All right. My niece went through a divorce, and she hired a family lawyer in Rice Lake. His name is Dean Halverson." "Let me call her." "I don't have the money to pay, could you?" "We'll figure that out later. Around here, people help each other." The CPS visit changed the entire atmosphere. Shelley became vigilant to the point of near obsession. She scrubbed the guest house clean, reorganized the shelves and cabinets, made sure every meal was recorded, every homework assignment completed. She could not sleep. She checked the locks twice, then 3 times. Sawyer noticed. "At 3 this morning, you turned on the water," he said one day. The 2 of them were standing out in the orchard, cutting away the last of the dead branches. "I was cleaning. You were panicking." Shelley squeezed the pruning shears too hard. A living branch fell to the ground. She looked at it. "He's going to take the children from me," she whispered. "He'll walk into court looking perfect. He always looks perfect." "You're not even in court yet. Right now, we're dealing with the report." "But what if the report says this guest house isn't up to standard? What if they say I don't have stable housing, stable income? Then we fix everything they put in it." "We?" Sawyer stopped what he was doing. He turned and looked straight at her, and for the first time since she had known him, there was no distance left in his eyes. "I only patched the guest house roof. I'll repair it properly. And the furnace, I'll replace it before Friday." "Not a portable heater, a real furnace. And I'll put you on payroll, orchard manager, wages, taxes, proper paperwork." Shelley shook her head. "You can't afford to do that." "I can't afford to stand here and watch you lose your children because I was too stubborn to run this place the way it should have been run." His voice was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was simply the voice of a man making a very practical decision, even if that decision happened to be a costly one. Shelley looked at him. "Why?" Sawyer picked up the shears again. "Because those 3 kids in there are eating cereal right now," he said, nodding faintly toward the guest house. "And the last time I heard cereal being poured into bowls in that kitchen was 4 years ago. I'm not ready to lose that sound one more time." Then he turned back to pruning. Shelley stood among the bare rows of apple trees, the cold wind lashing at her face, and felt the thing she had been most afraid to feel. That maybe, this time, she really could stay. But staying came with a price. Lawson Webber arrived in Ridgewater 2 days before Thanksgiving. He did not come to the orchard. Not yet. Instead, he rented a room at the Pine Motor Lodge on Highway 63. He ate breakfast at the diner in town. He began introducing himself to the people around town. He was exactly what Shelley had warned them about. Charming, composed, full of concern. The kind of man who looked like a father who had made mistakes and now only wanted to make things right. "My wife left in the middle of the night and took the kids," he told Helen Baxter at the grocery store, carrying a bag of groceries he would never actually touch. "I've been worried sick." Helen looked at the man standing in front of her, the neatly pressed coat, the earnest eyes, the wedding ring still on his finger, and for the first time felt a flicker of doubt creep in. Not doubt about Shelley, doubt about the story itself, because both versions sounded plausible, and that was the most dangerous kind of lie. At the diner, Lawson shook hands with Frank Moberg, the owner of the repair shop, then with Jim and Dana Peavy, whose dairy farm bordered Sawyer's land. He asked about the local community. He used words like stability, co-parenting, and the best interests of the children. That evening, Jim Peavy said to his wife, "He seems decent enough, put together." Dana replied, "It's easy to look put together. You don't know who a person really is until they've been stripped bare." Lawson came to the orchard on a Sunday morning. He parked his rental car neatly beside Shelley's mud-splattered Tahoe, then stepped out in brand-new shoes, the kind that had never truly touched real ground. Shelley was in the shed. The moment she saw him through the window, her whole body went rigid. Out in the yard, Oliver was splitting wood. The instant he saw his father, he froze, the axe stopping mid-swing. "Hey, son." Lawson smiled, warmly, naturally. The same smile Oliver still remembered from birthday parties and Christmas mornings. The good part of an equation that made the bad part far more complicated. "What are you doing here?" Oliver asked. "I came to see you, to see everyone." Lawson let his gaze move over the guest house, the orchard, then the main house. "This is where your mother's been staying?" Shelley stepped out through the shed door. "You need to leave," she said. Lawson raised both hands, palms out, the familiar gesture of a harmless man. He had practiced this one. "Shelley, I didn't come here to argue. I just want to talk." "If you want to talk, talk through the lawyers." "Lawyers only make things worse. You know that." He stepped a little closer. His voice dropped, turning intimate, the voice he always used when it was just the two of them. "I've changed, Shelley. I know you don't believe that yet, but I really have changed. Dr. Myers, my therapist, says I need to apologize in person. That's all I'm asking for. One conversation." Everything about him was terrifyingly exact. His body language, his choice of words, even the faint crack in his voice when he mentioned changing. Perfect. And it was precisely because it was so perfect that it was horrifying. Sawyer stepped out onto the porch of the main house. He said nothing. He only stood leaning against the porch post, his arms hanging at his sides, quietly watching. His presence alone was enough to change the entire geometry of the yard. Lawson saw him. "And I'm guessing you're the property owner." "Guess so," Sawyer said. "Sawyer, right?" Lawson said. "Lawson Webber." He held out his hand. Sawyer looked at the hand. Did not take it. "My children are on your property," Lawson said, lowering his hand, a thin layer of steel beginning to show at the edges of his voice. "I want to spend time with them. That's between you and their mother." "Actually, it's between me and the state of Wisconsin. I've filed for visitation." The silence stretched. Lawson let it settle, then turned back to Shelley. I'll be at the Pine Motor Lodge through the holiday. I'd love to take the kids to Thanksgiving dinner. Just one dinner. Supervised, if that's what it takes. Shelley did not answer. Her arms were folded so tightly across her chest that her knuckles had gone white. Lawson waited. When no answer came, he nodded, polite, patient, still playing the part, then turned and got back into the car. Before he drove away, he waved to Oliver. Oliver did not wave back, but he did not put the axe down either. That night, Shelley and Sawyer sat at the kitchen table in the main house. The children were asleep over in the guest house. Shelley held a mug of tea in her hands, but did not drink. "He's going to get visitation," she said. "Dean, my lawyer, says there's almost no way to stop it. No criminal record, no restraining order, nothing on paper." "What about the bruise?" "It healed, no photos. My word against his." Sawyer tapped his finger against the tabletop. "What does your lawyer say you should do?" "Document everything. Cooperate. Don't come across like I'm trying to keep the children away from their father." She gave a hollow laugh. "The system protects procedure. It doesn't protect the people trapped inside that procedure. Then follow the procedure." "I am. But Lawson doesn't just know how to follow procedure, Sawyer." She looked down at her tea. "He knows how to win over the people inside it." "You saw him today? He's already started talking to people in town. He's turning himself into the most reasonable person in this story. Some people will see through him." "And some won't," Shelley said. "And that's all he needs. Just one CPS worker, one judge who looks at him and sees a worried father, and looks at me and sees an unstable mother who ran off with the kids." Sawyer was silent. Then he said something Shelley did not expect. "If it goes to court, I'll testify." Shelley looked up at him. "If it comes to that," he said, "I'll tell them what I've seen, about the children, about how they live here, about the condition they were in when they arrived. Sawyer, that would mean letting them dig through your whole life, your past." "I know. Ethan, Rachel, all of it. I know." He looked her straight in the eye. "I've spent 4 years living in a house with a door that's always closed," he said. "I'm tired of closed doors." On Thanksgiving morning, Shelley cooked in the kitchen of the main house, Sawyer's kitchen, because the one in the guest house was so cramped that even making a pot of oatmeal felt crowded. She made a dry brined turkey she had learned from YouTube, green beans mixed with canned cream of mushroom soup, because that was how her mother used to make them, and mashed potatoes with a slightly excessive amount of butter. Not perfect, but right. The children helped set the table. 4 places. Teddy insisted on adding a 5th, for Patch-Up, the rabbit, who was given his own small plate and a walnut. It was the first time they had eaten together like that, not in separate spaces, not at different hours, but gathered around one table, in the same house, with the lively sound that Sawyer's home had not heard in years. Margot said grace before the meal. She made it up on the spot. "Thank you for the food, for the roof over our heads, and for the people who know how to fix things." Sawyer looked at the plate in front of him for a long time after that. After dinner, while the children sprawled across the living room floor playing a game Helen Baxter had sent over, Shelley stood washing dishes and Sawyer dried them. They worked in the easy rhythm of 2 people who had stopped keeping track of whose turn it was. "This is the first Thanksgiving in this house since—" He stopped. "You don't have to say it." "Since Rachel and Ethan." He let out a slow breath. "I thought it would hurt more." "Does it hurt?" "It hurts in a different way. Not less. Just differently." Shelley handed him a plate. Their fingers touched on the wet porcelain. Neither of them pulled away. "Different can be good," she said. Sawyer gave the slightest nod. "I'm still getting used to that." December. The hearing was set for January 12th. Dean Halverson came to the guest house, spread papers all over the kitchen table, and began walking Shelley through the strategy. Lawson has filed for joint custody, alternating weeks in the summer and every other weekend during the school year. He's presenting himself as a man in recovery. He's turning himself into the victim, Shelley said. In family court, those two things are almost the same. Dean pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Right now we have stable housing, school enrollment records for all 3 children, an employment contract. Sawyer is also willing to testify about the condition the children were in when they arrived. And what does Lawson have? Biological relation, no criminal record, stable finances, a letter from his therapist, and a pretty persuasive story about a wife who disappeared in the middle of the night without a word. I left because... I know why you left, Shelley. The question is whether the court will accept that leaving was justified when you have no proof. Shelley looked at the stack of papers in front of her. So that means I could lose. You could lose some things, Dean said. Losing some things is not the same as losing. After Dean left, Shelley remained sitting alone in the guest house. Oliver found her there, sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against a cabinet door. He sat down beside her. The two of them were silent for a long time. Then Oliver said, "If they make us go with Dad, I'll come back." "Oliver, I mean it. I'll walk back if I have to. You're only 12. 13 in March?" Shelley pulled him into her arms. He let her hold him. It was the first time in months that he did not pull away. "We're not going anywhere," she said. "Promise?" Shelley did not promise. She could not. But she held him tighter, and this time he did not push her away. The town gradually began to take sides, slowly, messily, and not entirely. Helen Baxter brought a box of groceries to the guest house along with a typed letter. "A character reference," she said. 22 signatures. Shelley looked down at the list. She recognized some of the names: the school librarian, the woman from the post office, Frank Moberg from the repair shop, the man she had only spoken to exactly twice. Frank signed too? Frank's first wife left him once, same way you left Lawson. Helen shrugged. Only difference is, Frank was the one worth leaving, so he can tell the difference. But not everyone saw it that way. Jim Peavy ran into Sawyer at the feed store and said that maybe Shelley ought to think about what was fair. "He's still the kid's father, Sawyer. He has rights." "Having rights and being right aren't always the same thing," Sawyer said. Jim frowned. "I'm just saying. From the outside, it all looks a little off." "Her living on your property." Sawyer went so still that when he spoke again, his voice sounded even colder. "What exactly looks off about it, Jim?" Jim still had enough pride to feel embarrassed. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just saying that's how people are going to look at it." "Then tell them to look harder." With that, he walked away. But the conversation stayed in his stomach like a stone. That night, he parked his truck on the far side of the garage so that from the road it would no longer be visible beside Shelley's Tahoe. He did not tell Shelley about that. He did not want her to know that even he had started calculating appearances, because that would only confirm the fear she had always carried with her, that even when you do the right thing, sometimes you still have to perform it so it looks right too. Christmas Eve. Small, imperfect, but important. Shelley hung lights in the guest house using a power strip that would almost certainly violate a few fire codes if anyone looked too closely. The children made decorations out of paper and foil. There was no Christmas tree, Shelley could not afford one, until Sawyer appeared at dusk carrying a tree over his shoulder, taller than 4 feet, that he had cut from the back of the property. He brought it into the living room and set it up without offering any explanation. "It's crooked," Oliver said. "Trees are supposed to be crooked," Sawyer replied. Any tree that stands perfectly straight is a tree that's lying. Teddy hung ornaments on the lowest branches, heavy enough to bend them downward. Margot hung the paper star she had spent days making, every point even, every fold exact. Oliver hung nothing at all, but he stood near the tree, and that was enough. That night, after the children were asleep, Shelley crossed the yard to the main house. The porch light was still on. Sawyer was sitting on the steps despite the cold, holding a glass of whiskey he was clearly not really drinking. She sat down beside him. "Thank you," she said, "for the tree. It's just taking up space." "Sawyer." He turned to look at her. "I need you to let me thank you. Don't brush it aside." He held her gaze. Something in his expression shifted slightly. Not exactly warming, but more like allowing warmth to enter. "You're welcome," he said. Then, more quietly, "Merry Christmas, Shelley." She leaned her shoulder against his. He did not move away. They sat there in the cold, looking out at the dark orchard, the bare trunks standing in rows like sentries. From the guest house, the Christmas lights blinked through the window, red then white, white then red. "I'm afraid of needing someone again," Shelley said. "After Lawson, I told myself the children were enough. No one else gets to come in. That would be safer." "Is it really safer?" "Safer and smaller aren't the same thing," she said softly. "I'm learning that." Sawyer slowly turned the glass in his hand. "I told myself the opposite after Rachel and Ethan died. I decided that if I let nothing in, then nothing could be taken away again. Lock the door. Stop finishing things." He paused. "Then you came here, and the first thing you did was clear the east rows. Cleared away that pile of dead limbs I'd been looking at for 2 years without touching. They needed clearing. A lot of things needed doing," he said. "You were the first person who just did it, without standing there waiting to ask whether I wanted you to." Shelley smiled faintly. "I can be pushy. You had to be." The words came out rough, as if he himself was surprised to hear that admission leave his mouth. Shelley looked up at him. He looked back. The distance between them now was very small. "I want to stay here," she said. "Not because I'm still running from something, because this is where I want to be." Sawyer set his glass down. He took her hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, but warm. "I'm not good at this," he said. "At what?" "The part that comes after you open the door." "That's okay." Shelley squeezed his hand. "I'm not good at the part where you walk through it." He almost smiled. And even that near smile was enough to change his whole face. They did not kiss. Not yet. But they sat beside each other in the cold, hand in hand, and it felt like the beginning of something neither of them had to pretend about. Inside, Shelley checked on the children one more time before going to bed. Teddy was still awake, lying rigid in bed, his eyes wide open. "Hey, little bear, what's wrong?" "Did you leave?" "I didn't go anywhere. I'm right here." "But you went outside. You were gone." "I only went to the porch." 20 steps, that's all." Teddy's lower lip trembled. "Dad went outside too. Dad said he was going to get something. Then he didn't come back." Shelley climbed into bed and lay down beside him. Patch-up was caught between them. She held Teddy until his breathing finally evened out, and then she kept holding him a while longer, because the truth was, she needed it too. In the dark, she thought about what Sawyer had said, the part that comes after you open the door. She thought about how Teddy now measured safety in steps, 20 steps to the porch, 214 steps to the main house, exactly the number Margot had counted, and an uncountable distance to the place Lawson had disappeared into. She thought about how she had taught her youngest son that people leave, not through words, but through experience. And undoing that lesson would probably take longer than any orchard takes to grow. January. Court day. Shelley wore the most respectable outfit she had, a navy blouse, dark slacks, and a pair of shoes borrowed from Helen. Sawyer drove her to the courthouse in Rice Lake in his truck. The entire way there, neither of them spoke. The windshield wipers swept steadily across the glass through the cold rain. Dean Halverson met them right outside the entrance. He brought his parents, Dean said, and the therapist, too. In the courtroom, Lawson sat with his attorney, his parents, and a woman in a gray blazer whom Shelley assumed must be Dr. Myers. Lawson looked perfect. Like the cover photo of some magazine devoted to decent fathers. He looked at Shelley, then mouthed silently, "I miss the kids." The hearing lasted 4 hours. Lawson's attorney was meticulous, professional, and so precise it was almost merciless. He presented Lawson as a man in recovery. The therapist took the stand and testified that Lawson had made significant progress. Lawson's mother cried on the witness stand as she spoke about how much she missed her grandchildren. Then Dean called Shelley. She told the truth. All of it. The dresser dragged in front of the door. The phone checks. The way Lawson gripped her arm at the dinner table. The night she carried the children out and left. She cried halfway through, which she had tried very hard not to do, but she kept talking, and that was what mattered. Then Dean called Oliver. Shelley had not wanted that. She had argued with Dean for days. But Oliver had insisted. He had walked into Dean's office and said, "If nobody says it out loud, then nothing will ever change." Oliver sat in the witness box, looking small in that room, but steady in a way that made Shelley's chest ache. Dean asked his questions very carefully. "Did you ever see your father hurt your mother?" "Yes. One time he grabbed her arm during dinner, pulled her out of the chair." "Did anyone intervene?" "No." "Why not?" Oliver looked across the courtroom at his father. "Because people learn that the less they do, the faster it ends." The whole room went silent. Lawson's attorney began his cross-examination in a gentle voice, trying to frame everything as a single isolated incident. Oliver listened to every question, then answered with the precision of a boy who had spent years watching adults lie and had decided he was done with it. "You said your father grabbed your mother's arm one time. Just one time?" "One time I saw. But that means you cannot testify to anything else." Oliver paused. Then he said, "But I can testify that we moved 9 times in 4 months after we left. I can testify that my mom skipped meals so we would have enough. I can testify that my little brother sleeps holding a stuffed rabbit because he's afraid of the dark, even though he never used to be afraid of the dark." Lawson's attorney sat down. Sawyer was the final witness. He spoke about the night Shelley arrived, about the bruise, about the children, about the months that followed. "In your observation, how are the children doing now?" Dean asked. Sawyer was silent for a beat. "Oliver is learning how to be 12 years old instead of bracing himself like a 30-year-old man. Last week, Margot wrote a story that, for the first time, was not a list of all the places they've lived. And Teddy runs. He doesn't just walk anymore. He runs everywhere. Because he isn't afraid anymore." He looked over at Shelley. "And Shelley works harder than anyone I've ever known. She cleared an orchard that even I had given up on." "In your opinion, Mr. Hollis," Dean said, "are these children safe?" "They're home." Dean nodded. No further questions. The judge reserved ruling. 3 weeks later, the decision finally came down. Dean called Shelley while she was out in the orchard. She was pruning at the time. By now she did it almost on instinct, the shears feeling like an extension of her own arm. "Supervised visitation only," Dean said. "Twice a month, 4 hours each time at a supervised visitation center. No overnights, no unsupervised contact until he completes a full psychological evaluation. The shears slipped from Shelley's hand. She sank to her knees between 2 rows of Honeycrisp trees, the wet grass soaking cold through the knees of her pants. "Shelley, are you still there?" "I'm here." It's not a total win. He still has legal parental rights, but the judge cited Oliver's testimony and referred to a pattern of coercive control. She saw it, Shelley. Shelley pressed the phone to her forehead, closed her eyes, and breathed. "Dean." "Yes?" "Thank you." Lawson did not take the outcome gracefully. He did not return to the orchard. He did not call either. But news still filtered back through town that he was still staying at the Pine Motor Lodge, drinking heavily. That he had picked a fight with Jim Peavy at the feed store, shouting about a biased system. The veneer was beginning to peel away. The people who had once thought he was the kind of man who had it all together were finally seeing what Shelley had been saying all along. A man who only seems reasonable when he is the one winning. He left Ridgewater on a Tuesday, without saying goodbye to the children. Oliver stood at the shed window, watching the rental car drive past the orchard. "Dad's gone," the boy said. Sawyer stood beside him, still holding a wrench in his hand. "Yeah. Is he coming back?" "I don't know." Oliver was silent for a long time. Then he looked up at Sawyer. "Will you teach me how to use the lathe?" Sawyer studied the boy's face for a moment. He saw something in it. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but a decision. To keep building something from here. "Yeah," he said. "Go get your safety glasses." February. The orchard lay dormant beneath a thin layer of snow, but Shelley saw it differently now. She could see what it might become. She had learned from library books, agricultural extension materials, videos watched on her phone late at night. And now she had a plan. New rootstock for the damaged Cortland block. Repair the cider press. Reopen the farm stand before June. One morning, she laid it all out for Sawyer, papers spread across the kitchen table. He looked over the numbers, the schedules, the diagrams she had drawn. "You did all this yourself?" he asked. "That sounds like you're surprised." "Not surprised." He paused, as if searching for the right word. "Impressed, and a little annoyed." "Annoyed?" "Because I should have done all this 3 years ago." "Maybe you just needed someone standing there to hand you the saw." Sawyer looked at her across the papers, and something passed quietly between them, an understanding that this was no longer just about the orchard. It was about rebuilding everything, rebuilding themselves. And this time, doing it together. "Partners?" Shelley said, holding out her hand. Sawyer took it, held on longer than a normal handshake required. "Partners." March. The ice began to thaw. Water ran everywhere, from the gutters, through the ditches, down into the creek behind the property swollen with snowmelt. Mud in the orchard rose to ankle height, and the children tracked it through every room in both houses. Sawyer did not complain. One morning, he realized it had been weeks since he had last complained about the noise. Teddy's pounding footsteps through the house, the sound that once cut through him like a blade, felt different now, like proof that these 4 walls were still standing. He finished the rocking horse. He sanded it again. Painted it red with white trim, then set it by the stove to dry. The next morning, when Teddy saw it, no one had to tell him it was his. He simply climbed on and began rocking back and forth, humming some tuneless little melody that was not really a song, but was full of joy. Sawyer stood in the kitchen doorway watching, a mug of coffee in his hand. Shelley came to stand beside him. "You finished it," she said softly. "Yeah. Had to." "No, you didn't have to." She looked at the rocking horse, then at him. "You chose to finish it." Sawyer gave the slightest nod. He took a sip of coffee, not trusting that his voice would be steady enough if he tried to speak. That evening, Oliver was in the wood shop. He was turning a bowl on the lathe, his first real project. The bowl was crooked, uneven, thicker in some places than others, but it held its shape. When he finished, Oliver held it up. "It's not very good," he said. "Obviously," Sawyer replied. Oliver turned the bowl in his hands. Then he picked up a pencil from the workbench and wrote something on the bottom. After that, he set the bowl on the shelf beside Sawyer's unfinished pieces, then walked outside. A little while later, after Oliver was gone, Sawyer picked up the bowl. On the bottom, in the careful handwriting of a 12-year-old boy, were the words, "Made at Hollis Orchard. O. Webber Hollis." Sawyer looked at that hyphen for a long time. Then he set the bowl back on the shelf. He did not carry it into the closed room. He left it exactly where Oliver had put it, beside the finished things and the unfinished ones, in a woodshop slowly filling with the unmistakable signs that people lived here. April. The first buds had begun to appear on the apple trees that were still alive, small, white, fragile. Shelley stood among them at dawn, coffee steam curling through the early chill, and thought how strange it was that sweetness could grow from something so delicate. The farm stand was nearly finished. Oliver and Sawyer had built the frame the week before. Margot designed the sign, Hollis Orchard, established 1987, and beneath it, in smaller lettering, came the part Shelley quietly added one evening, paintbrush in hand, and her hand very steady. And partner. No one asked Sawyer for permission. The next morning, he saw it, stood in front of the sign for a long while, his hands in his pockets, saying nothing. But he did not paint over it. That was enough. One evening near the end of April, Shelley sat at the table in the main house, sorting through paperwork. Sawyer's bills, the orchard ledgers, the new business permit application she was still working on. Tucked between two folders, she found an old photograph, a young woman with dark curly hair holding a baby on her hip, smiling toward the person behind the camera. On the back, in faded ink, were the words, "Rachel and Ethan. First apple-picking trip." Shelley held the photograph very carefully. She did not hide it away. She took it to the bookshelf, where the picture frames were still turned face down. She turned one of them over. Inside it was empty, the old photo long since removed. Shelley slipped the photograph of Rachel and Ethan into it, then stood it upright. When Sawyer walked in, he stopped short. He saw the photograph. Something moved in his throat. "I found it in your paperwork," Shelley said. "They deserve to be seen." Sawyer stood there for a long time, looking at his wife's face, looking at his son's small hand reaching toward the camera. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "They do." He did not cry. But he stood in front of that photograph for nearly a full minute, and when he finally turned away, something in his posture had changed. A little straighter, a little lighter. That night, Ethan's bedroom door opened. The next morning, Shelley noticed that the little boots were no longer by the back door. Sawyer had moved them onto a shelf in the woodshop, not to throw them away, but to place them somewhere with intention. Late spring. Golden evening light poured through the orchard. The blossoms had now given way to small green fruit. Harvest was still months away, but they were there, real, touchable, believable. Sawyer and Shelley walked the rows together. By now, they did it almost every evening, checking the trees, pinching off shoots, talking about everything and nothing at all. Tonight, Teddy was sitting on Sawyer's shoulders, pointing up at the sky and naming birds. Margot walked ahead, notebook in hand, writing observations about the trees in language that was growing more beautiful by the day. Oliver walked behind them, using the pocket knife Sawyer had given him for his birthday to whittle a branch, a real knife, not a toy, because Sawyer had said, "You're old enough to be trusted with something sharp." They reached the end of the east rows, the very rows Shelley had cleared in her first week there. "These trees look good," Sawyer said, looking at the branches in front of him. "They survived," Shelley replied. "Same thing." They stood there, all 5 of them, in the middle of an orchard that had once been dying and now no longer was. Honey-colored light lay over everything. Somewhere, a meadowlark called. Teddy tugged on Sawyer's hair. "Higher," he said. "You're already at the highest spot there is, buddy." "Higher!" Sawyer lifted Teddy down from his shoulders and then raised him high into the air, arms fully extended, so the boy's silhouette stood out against the vast Wisconsin sky. Teddy spread his arms and laughed, the kind of laughter that no longer held even the smallest memory of fear. Shelley watched the 2 of them. Oliver stopped what he was doing and looked up. And Margot, the child who recorded everything, closed her notebook for the first time. Because some moments cannot fit inside a list. No one said anything about family. No one needed to. The orchard held them. The house held them. The evening held them. And in the wood shop, on the shelf between the crooked bowl and the red rocking horse, there was a space where finished things and unfinished things sat side by side, waiting for tomorrow. Not every family is built from blood. Some families are built from what remains after the storm, from rows that have been cleared, roofs that have been patched, and doors that have been left open. Not every home is the place where you were born. Some homes are the places you choose to stay, with crooked trees, roofs that once leaked, and rooms that were once kept shut. This was a place like that. And that is the story of people who were not saved in any loud, dramatic way, with no miracle arriving at exactly the right moment, and no wound disappearing overnight. Only people who had walked through the storm, gathered up their broken pieces, and quietly built a place to remain. Sometimes, family is not the place where you were born. It is the place where, at last, someone opens the door and lets you come in, and never asks you to leave again. If you like stories like this, slow, sad, but with light at the end, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next videos. And if you'd like, leave a comment and tell me, to you, is home a place or a person? Thank you for staying until the end of the story. See you in the next video.